Welcome back here with us on Overdrive. It's been 60 years since Ferruccio Lamborghini founded the very famous sports car company Lamborghini, which has given us plenty of horses and awe-inspiring sports cars to lust after. Now, Bert was invited exclusively to participate in the anniversary celebrations in Bologna, and he managed to drive 5 of the cars that he could only dream of.
Never in my wildest dreams did I ever think that I'd get an opportunity to drive Lamborghini's Countach. Keep in mind, this is one of those hypercars of another generation, considerably analog, but still with some electronic aids for comfort and convenience. Most of everything else in this car, well, it's just pure manual. I'm nervous, I'm scared, because this is a very expensive car, and I haven't driven something this epic in ages. But to me, this is a fairly emotional moment. I've been requesting Lamborghini for nearly 2 decades, and it's finally here. An opportunity to drive some of the most significant V12 powered cars in Lamborghini's history. This is epic on another scale entirely. Keep in mind, everything is manual. This is the LP400 I'm driving. It's got a manual 5-speed transmission, the steering is manual. It's got 3 pedals. This isn't a modern day automatic hypercar or supercar that Lamborghini makes. This comes from an entirely different generation. And the nice thing is, you can see where that whole aggressive nature of Lamborghini stems from. It's cars like the Countach that set the tone for all of their modern day supercars. And that aggression hasn't dimmed down at all. This isn't an easy car to drive. Keep in mind, we're so used to driving automatics these days. Getting a hold of a manual that puts out this amount of power, where you have got to control almost everything. People just stare at you with their mouths wide open. Fairly exciting car to drive. My mouth's gone dry. My heart's pounding. It's such an incredible car. Everywhere you go with the Countach. The Miura, as you know it, was effectively the car that put Lamborghini on the map. And to think that Ferruccio Lamborghini, well, may not have necessarily wanted this car, but it was Sanzani, Gandini, Bob Wallace who wanted to build a car that could reflect all the racing that was taking place around Italy at the time. And they did develop the Miura, and Ferruccio Lamborghini signed off on the car and allowed it to get into production. And the rest, as I say, is history. It's hard to believe that something like this was developed way back in 1960s, mid-engine V12 with a 5-speed manual transmission. Driving these cars is a very different experience because keep in mind, these aren't fuel injected, they're carbureted. And you have to keep the throttle on the boil for those carburetors to work. 12 cylinders of intoxication. I can smell the fuel. I can hear the engine. It's right behind my head. It's hard to believe this thing was built in the 60s. And as you can see, I'm really reaching out for the steering wheel here because this car was developed as a racing car. Though it eventually went into series production. And it's such a gorgeous shape. Right in front of your eyes, all you can see are these 2 big pontoon-shaped fenders. Let me tell you, it's not easy driving these things. But I've just driven the Countach, and the Miura just seems so much nicer, so much easier. You know what's amazing me is that the ride quality on this car is just so magnificent. And today, nearly 70 years after this car was made, it boggles my mind to think just where is Lamborghini headed. I must look stupid because I just can't stop grinning. car I'm driving just now, well, there's just one word to describe it: exquisite. I'm quite surprised why Lamborghini kind of moved away from the Grand Tourer classifications, went more aggressive with their sports cars and hypercars, because the 400 GT that I'm driving just now is probably one of the grandest cars I've ever driven. Now, the 400 GT was the second car that Lamborghini introduced to the market. It followed the 350 GT, but continued with more or less the same mechanicals, the same V12 powertrain, the 3.9 litre V12, but was a better car than the 350 GT. The 400 GT is perhaps everything Ferruccio Lamborghini wanted from his cars. It was comfortable and it was fast and powerful, quite unlike modern day Lamborghinis, which are aggressive but fast and powerful. It's hard to imagine something this exquisite was built almost 80 years ago. It had a short production run. It went into production in 1966 and production discontinued in 1968. Roughly about 240 odd units were built of the 400 GT. And today these cars are priceless. But price aside, I'm quite astonished by the elegance, the superb engineering that went into a car of this order way back in the 60s. This is such an effortless car to drive. I could do this day in and day out. We've come down a very, very fast patch of tarmac. Of course, now this is far more twisty. The ride quality, the steering, the response from the engine is just magnificent. We were just barreling down a motorway a few minutes ago, and the 400 GT, well, I clocked about 160 kilometers an hour, and it felt like a Sunday. Smooth, easy, effortless. My God, this car is a gem.
Life sure seems great when you can tame all these powerful horses under Lamborghinis, doesn't it? Well, there's more where that came from. We'll take a very quick break here on the show, but coming up on the other side, we will get back to all the anniversary celebrations from Bologna. Stay with us, you're watching Overdrive. Welcome back here with us on Overdrive. It's hard to imagine that Lamborghinis were built with manual gearboxes, right? Because we're so used to driving only the automatic transmissions of the new generation Bulls. Well, there's way more from that celebration back in Bologna. Here's Bert with more.
I'm now in the Murcielago, and this car was a significant car in Lamborghini's history again, because it marked the transition for Lamborghini from analog to, well, sort of electronically controlled cars. The Murcielago represented several firsts for Lamborghini. It was the first supercar to be developed in-house at Lamborghini's new facility, the Centro Stile. It was the first to have offered automatic transmission. It was the first to have a selectable reverse gear by pressing a button. It was the first Lamborghini to offer electronically adjustable suspension. It was the first Lamborghini to offer safety aids like traction control and ESC. It was the first Lamborghini to offer several new firsts, and in that way it became a huge milestone for Lamborghini. This has to be one of the most epic sounding cars I've driven all of today. Just listen to this. And it revs all the way up to 8,500 RPM, which is just incredible. Can you drive a Lamborghini and not think about the million ways you could go and make money to buy you one? If there was ever a day that felt completely satisfying, this would be it. After all those gorgeous Lamborghinis, those classic V12s, I now find myself in the Aventador. And this car is significant for one reason. It is the last of the naturally aspirated V12s. The Aventador is the most modern V12 that Lamborghini has built. And it spells all the aggression, all the ferocity, all the pace and the might of Lamborghini's magnificent V12s they've ever developed. The Aventador's V12 is still very much based on the original V12 design. This cabin and its design with its aircraft's cockpit-like controls, well, the design, it traces its origins back to the Countach, much like several other aspects of this car. And that is one of the aspects of Lamborghini's cars that I've truly enjoyed today. You see a continuity of all that Lamborghini has developed in each and every car over nearly 5 decades. Ever since Lamborghini began operations way back in the 60s, 1963, with the 350 GT and subsequently the 400 GT and several of its V12 powered cars, each of them has been capable of ridiculous speeds for their time. The 400 GT that I drove today, speeds in excess of 200 kilometers an hour. Keep in mind, this was way back in the 60s, 200 kilometers an hour back then on those single ply tires. And now down to the Aventador, 300 kilometers plus in the blink of an eye. So of the 5 cars that I've driven today, which one would be my favorite? Well, that would be akin to asking me to pick my favorite child. You can't pick one. I'd pick them all.
The sweet life of an automotive journalist. Of course, there are plenty of hours that we spend waiting at airports and the long flights, and you're extremely tired at very odd hours, but all of it, when it leads to such sweet rides, definitely makes all of the travel worth it. It's time for us to wrap up this week's edition of Overdrive, but remember, stay in touch with us through Facebook, Twitter as well as YouTube. Until next week then, drive and ride safe.